The local data company's latest shop vacancy report reviews over 1,000 retail centres across the UK. While the good news is that the threefold increase in vacancy rates since 2007 has plateaued, in extreme cases, 1 in 3 shops stands vacant. The short and medium view is that this is unlikely to improve significantly due to the current economic climate and the rise of alternative sales channels. The local data company released its latest report at Linklaters in London to a packed audience keen to hear from an impressive panel. Let's first consider the general outlook.
And the data shows that the situation is still bad. There's still a large number of vacancies on the UK high streets, though it hasn't got dramatically worse.
I think the interesting trends in the report suggest just a variation of experience on different high streets. There are some, which I think predominantly are in the south of England, where you've seen a fall in vacancy rates, and those rates are very low. Equally, there are other parts of the UK where you have high vacancy rates, which remain stubbornly high.
There's fundamental structural differences in the way we shop, the way we conduct our leisure. So this rather confirms what we've known. But what it also proves, or what it also points us to, is looking for good imaginative solutions to get us out of this pickle and actually rebuild our high streets.
I would recommend anyone actually to spend some money with the local data company to get their hands on this data. So it wasn't a surprise today to find that the vacancy rate has really stabilised. What is interesting is that what we are seeing, and there is some evidence in what Matthew's presented today, is that it's multiples that are coming out of the high streets. There's one of the graphs that was showing big brands coming out of high streets and consolidating in out-of-town centres.
Top of the list of the panel's concerns was the poor economic outlook and low consumer confidence.
The current economic climate says everything. The last 2 or 3 years, it was only 3 or 4 years ago that we were at 6% vacancy rates in the UK high street. That's now gone to 14%, and it is all about the UK economy.
Consumers are certainly very stretched with rising prices, running well ahead of wages. That's the overall picture. But there's a lot of subtlety about the retail picture because of the competition to high street retailers from online vendors, and the official statistics nationally show a big increase in online retailing, and that is obviously hitting established players.
The LDC report did highlight more encouraging news from the independent retail sector.
We have seen independent retailers bounce back where the conditions are right, and over 65% of all the shops we track are independents. I think the question is about longevity.
In many ways, independents are in a stronger position in town centres than they have been for some years, and the evidence for that is that the balance between independents and multiples in town centres, as reflected in the LDC data, has been moving consistently over the last 3 years in favour of independents.
LDC's latest report will give Mary Portas plenty of food for thought as she prepares her review on the future of the high street.
The weaker town centres, what have they got to do to reinvent themselves? I think that question is becoming really pressing at the moment.
There needs to be a fundamental change in policy and planning concerning these town centres. And I think whether you're a retailer or a landlord or you're a policy maker, all these things need to come together and therefore enable this changing high street to meet the needs of the 21st century.
This is about creating footfall for lots of different activities, not just retail. So what we need, and what she sees and what we support, is this idea of a much more creative, imaginative use of property in high streets, which requires sort of flexibility from the planning authority, flexibility from the sort of town centre managers.
With the overall outlook for the high street remaining generally bleak, the hope is the shortly to be published Portas report may help the call to action.
I think tough times ahead. I think most people acknowledge they're in for a hard slog. The British economy is not growing very fast. You're not going to suddenly get everything falling out of the tree from high growth, just easy pickings. It just isn't going to be like that.
There are some really good retailers that are performing well still. While the bad news grabs the headlines, there are a lot of businesses in this sector that are performing well. But what tends to be a theme running throughout those businesses is that many of them have a relatively small number of stores in the best performing centres. They tend to be retailers that have a good combination of channels, i.e. they're good online as well as in store. They're not the people in the weakest town.
If you're our grocer then the chances are your business is holding up very well. Food retailers, generally speaking, ride recessions very well, and that's proving to be the case currently. The luxury end of the market, unsurprisingly, luxury retail hasn't suffered that much, or it did in 2009, but has recovered very, very well since then. Outside of that, consumers appear to be looking for quality at a price.
Times are tough, that would be stating the obvious. But as a retailer that trades all around the UK, we are certainly committed to investing in our stores on the high street, despite the very tough economic circumstances.
Retailers are now chasing higher volumes, and there's increased pressure on their margins. So you need to understand that those are the pressures that the retailers are under, and the challenge for landlords is to stay close to them, really understand what their requirements are.
We know the internet's going to grow, we know that supermarket spend is going to grow, and we know that the multiple retailers are reducing the number of the stores they have into more primary locations.
Until we see some real improvement in disposable incomes for the consumer, and some movement in the housing market and some confidence in the value of our houses, then I don't see any improvement in the short term.